My name is Megan Reynolds, and at 34 years old, I thought I had a happy marriage. For 8 years, Andrew and I built what I believed was a loving partnership, until the moment it all shattered with a single slap across my face. My crime? Refusing to give my inherited house to his sister Brittany. When I stood my ground, he screamed, "I want you out of this house now, you bastard." I simply replied, "Okay." What they found instead of keys the following week changed everything. Before I tell you what was in that letter that transformed our lives, take a second to subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Trust me, what happened next is something you won't see coming. I met Andrew Thompson at my college roommate's wedding 9 years ago. I was serving as the maid of honor and he was a groomsman. There was an immediate spark between us that night. Andrew was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. He asked for my number before the night ended, and by the following morning, he had already texted to ask me out for coffee. Our romance was a whirlwind. Andrew swept me off my feet with surprise weekend getaways, thoughtful gifts, and constant affirmations about how perfect we were together. 8 months after our first date, he proposed during a sunset cruise. I said yes without hesitation. Looking back now, I realize how little time we had spent discussing our values, boundaries, and expectations for the future. But when you're wearing rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags. My grandmother Eleanor raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was only 7 years old. She was the strongest woman I've ever known. A retired English teacher, she filled our home with books and encouraged my creativity. Our Victorian house on Maple Street was my sanctuary growing up. The wraparound porch where we would drink hot chocolate on winter evenings, the window seat in my bedroom where I would read for hours, the garden where she taught me about resilience through nurturing plants. Every corner held precious memories. 2 years ago, my grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 88. I was devastated. In her will, she left me the house along with a letter explaining that generations of women in our family had maintained their independence through property ownership. "This house is your foundation," she wrote. "Never allow anyone to take away your security or sense of home." By then, Andrew and I had been married for 6 years. We had been renting a modern apartment downtown, but we decided to move into my grandmother's house. I was thrilled to return to the home that held so many meaningful memories. As an interior designer, I was also excited about preserving its historic charm while updating certain areas to suit our lifestyle. I had built a successful career as an interior designer, specializing in historic home renovations. I was fortunate enough to convert one of the spare bedrooms into a home office, which allowed me to work from home most days while occasionally meeting clients on site. My business was thriving, and I took great pride in my financial independence. Andrew worked as a marketing executive at his family's company, Thompson Media Group. His father, Gerald, had started the company 30 years ago, and it had grown into one of the largest advertising firms in the region. Andrew had joined straight out of college, and his path had been carefully paved by his father. He earned a substantial salary and received regular bonuses, but there was always an underlying tension about his position being handed to him rather than earned. Looking back, there were red flags about Andrew's family that I chose to ignore. His parents, Gerald and Patricia, had very specific expectations for their children. They micromanaged their education, career choices, and even personal relationships. Andrew's sister Brittany was the apple of their eye, the youngest child who could do no wrong. She was always described as brilliant and exceptional, though her academic performance was average at best. During our early years of marriage, I tried countless times to build a relationship with Brittany. I invited her to lunch, offered to help with her college assignments, and always remembered her birthday with thoughtful gifts. But Brittany kept me at arm's length, viewing me as an outsider who had somehow taken her brother away from the family fold. She would often make dismissive comments about my career, suggesting that interior design was just decorating and not a real profession like the business degree she was pursuing. When my grandmother passed and I inherited the house, I noticed subtle shifts in the dynamics with Andrew's family. Patricia would make comments like, "How lucky you are to have such a beautiful home handed to you," or "That house is far too big for just two people." Gerald would joke about how I hit the jackpot without having to work for it, conveniently forgetting that the house had been in my family for generations, maintained through the hard work and sacrifice of the women who came before me. Throughout those early years, my best friend Stephanie Morgan remained my rock. We had been friends since high school, and she knew my history, my heart, and could read between the lines when things weren't right. When she visited the house for the first time after we moved in, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Meg, I notice how Andrew's family talks about this place like they have some claim to it," she said, her voice low. "Make sure you protect yourself legally. Family can get weird about property." I brushed off her concerns at the time. "They're just adjusting to the change," I said. "Andrew understands how important this house is to me." How wrong I was. The truth is, I didn't want to see what was right in front of me. I had lost so much in my life already. My parents at 7, my grandmother just 2 years ago. I desperately wanted to believe that I had found my forever family in Andrew and the Thompsons. I wanted to belong somewhere so badly that I was willing to overlook the warning signs flashing all around me. Brittany's college graduation fell on a perfect spring Saturday. The ceremony was being held at State University, where she had completed her bachelor's degree in business administration after 5.5 years. The Thompsons had rented out the entire top floor of Carlton's, the most expensive restaurant in town, for the celebration afterward. "We need to leave early to get good seats," Andrew insisted that morning as I was finishing up some client work. "Mom wants the whole family in the front section." I closed my laptop and grabbed my purse. Of course. I wouldn't want to miss Brittany's big moment. The ceremony was long, with hundreds of graduates filing across the stage. When Brittany's name was called, Gerald and Patricia jumped to their feet, whistling and cheering as if she had just won the Nobel Prize. Andrew beamed with pride, and I clapped enthusiastically, genuinely happy for my sister-in-law. The celebration at Carlton's was lavish, with champagne flowing freely and a menu that must have cost thousands of dollars. I circulated among the guests, making polite conversation with extended family members and Brittany's friends whom I barely knew. Across the room, I noticed Brittany holding court, tossing her blonde hair as she laughed with her boyfriend Tyler. Patricia clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. "We have more exciting news to celebrate today," she announced, her voice carrying across the room. "Not only has our brilliant Brittany graduated with honors, but she's also been accepted to the MBA program right here at State University." Applause erupted as Brittany took a theatrical bow. I joined in, wondering why this was the first I was hearing about her graduate school plans. "And the best part," Patricia continued, looking directly at me, "is that she won't have to worry about student housing or those awful dorms. She'll be moving into Megan and Andrew's house, where she'll have plenty of space to study in peace." The champagne flute nearly slipped from my hand. I felt my cheeks flush as several pairs of eyes turned toward me. This was completely news to me. Andrew and I had never discussed Brittany moving in with us, not even as a possibility. Isn't that wonderful? Patricia was still looking at me, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I stammered, trying to find words that wouldn't cause a scene. "That's the first I'm hearing about this arrangement." An awkward silence fell over the immediate group. Patricia's smile tightened. "Oh, I thought Andrew had already discussed it with you. It makes perfect sense, with all those empty bedrooms in that big house of yours." "Mother," Andrew cut in, putting his arm around my shoulders in a grip that felt more possessive than supportive. "Megan and I will talk about the details later. Today is about celebrating Brittany." The tension eased as Gerald proposed another toast, but I felt as though I had been ambushed. I tried to catch Andrew's eye throughout the remainder of the party, but he seemed to be deliberately avoiding me, circulating among guests and refilling his whiskey glass more frequently than usual. The drive home was painfully silent. Andrew stared straight ahead, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "Were you planning to discuss Brittany moving in with me?" I finally asked, or was I supposed to find out when she showed up with her suitcases? "Don't be dramatic, Megan," he replied coldly. "It's not like we don't have the space." "That's not the point, Andrew." We're married. Major decisions like someone moving into our home should be made together. He scoffed. It's my sister. Family helps family. I didn't think it would be such a big deal. It is a big deal, I insisted, feeling my throat tighten. That house is special to me. It was my grandmother's. Here we go again with your house, he snapped, making a sharp turn onto our street. I've been living there for 2 years, contributing to the mortgage and taxes, but you still act like it's only yours. Because legally, it is mine, I said quietly. My grandmother left it to me. The car jerked to a stop in our driveway. Andrew turned to face me, his expression harder than I had ever seen it. Brittany needs a place to live while she gets her MBA. She's family. That house has 4 bedrooms, and you're using one as an office for your little decorating business, when you could easily work from the sunroom. My little decorating business pays half our expenses, I reminded him. And I need a proper workspace to meet with clients and review plans. God, you're being selfish, he muttered, getting out of the car and slamming the door. That night, for the first time in our marriage, Andrew slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, tears silently streaming down my face as I tried to understand how my husband could make such a significant decision without consulting me. The next morning, I called Stephanie while Andrew was out for his Sunday golf game. He just announced it at the party like it was already decided, I explained, pacing in the kitchen. Like I had no say in the matter at all. That's completely unacceptable, Stephanie said firmly. Stand your ground, Meg. This isn't about the space. It's about respect for you and your boundaries. I tried to suggest alternatives, I said. I told him I'd help Brittany find an affordable apartment near campus. I even offered to help with her rent for the first few months as a graduation gift. But he shot everything down. Because this isn't about what's best for Brittany, Stephanie pointed out. It's about what the Thompsons want, which is a piece of your property. They've always been jealous of what you have that they didn't provide. Her words hit home. The Thompsons had always been about appearances and control. My inheritance represented something they couldn't take credit for or control, and perhaps that was the real issue. What should I do? I asked. Be clear about your boundaries, Stephanie advised. Offer reasonable alternatives, but don't give in on this. Once they start making decisions about your home without you, where does it end? Where indeed? I had no idea at that moment just how prophetic her question would be. 3 days after the graduation party, I was reviewing fabric samples in my office when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting any clients, so I was surprised to find Brittany standing on my porch with her boyfriend Tyler and several shopping bags. Hey, she said breezily, pushing past me into the foyer. Andrew said it would be fine if we came by to check out the rooms. I need to measure for curtains and stuff. I stood there, momentarily speechless, as Tyler nodded awkwardly at me. He at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Brittany, I began carefully, Andrew and I haven't finalized any arrangements about you staying here. She rolled her eyes. He told me you'd say that. That's why he gave me a key. She dangled a house key in front of me. He said to tell you he'll be home early so you guys can talk, but that I should go ahead and start planning the space. My stomach dropped. Andrew had given her a key to my house without telling me. I felt violated and undermined in my own home. Which rooms can I look at? Brittany continued, seemingly oblivious to my distress. I was thinking the East Wing would be perfect since it has its own bathroom and that cute sitting area. The East Wing, she was referring to, contained my office and the adjoining guest room that I used for storing client materials and project supplies. It was essential to my business. Those rooms are currently being used, I said firmly. And regardless of what Andrew told you, we haven't agreed to any living arrangements yet. Brittany's face hardened. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of whatever issues you and my brother have, but he said it was fine. So unless you want me to call him right now and create a whole scene. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Andrew walked in. He looked surprised to see us standing in the foyer. Hey, I was hoping to get home before you arrived, he said to Brittany, not meeting my eyes. I was just telling Megan that I want to check out the East Wing rooms, Brittany said. She seems confused about the arrangement. Andrew finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of defiance and guilt. I thought we could give Britt the office and the guest room next to it. They connect, so it would be like a little suite. That's my workspace, Andrew, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. We never discussed this. You can move your desk to the sunroom, he said dismissively. It has better light anyway. Come on, Britt, I'll show you around. I stood frozen as my husband led his sister and her boyfriend through my home, pointing out features and discussing renovation possibilities as if I wasn't even there. I heard phrases like, "We could knock through this wall," and replace that old desk with a new one as they discussed dismantling the office I had carefully designed. That evening, Andrew informed me that his parents had invited us for dinner the following night. They want to discuss Brittany's move, he said casually, as if the decision had already been made. The dinner was clearly a setup. Patricia had prepared all of Andrew's favorite foods, and Gerald kept refilling his wine glass throughout the meal. As we finished dessert, Gerald pulled out a folder. "I've been working on some plans," he announced, spreading architectural drawings across the dining table. "We can convert that old sewing room of your grandmother's into a proper study area for Brittany. The contractor says it would only take about 3 weeks." I stared at the plans in disbelief. They were proposing structural changes to my historic home, removing built-in features that had been there for over a century. "And we'll need to update the bathroom," Patricia added. "Those vintage fixtures are charming but impractical." "Excuse me," I interrupted, my voice surprisingly calm despite my inner turmoil. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but these changes won't be happening. That house has historical significance, and I won't be altering its architectural integrity." Gerald chuckled condescendingly. "Now, Megan, don't be precious about a few old cabinets. We're talking about creating a proper space for Brittany's education. Which I'm not opposed to helping with," I clarified. "I've researched several apartments near campus that would be perfect for her needs." "Apartments?" Patricia scoffed. "With strangers and who knows what kind of safety issues?" "Absolutely not. Our daughter deserves better. The house is simply not available," I stated firmly. "It's my home and my business space." "Your home?" Gerald's voice took on an edge. "Andrew lives there too. It's his home as well, and he wants to help his sister." Andrew remained conspicuously silent, studying his wine glass instead of supporting me. As we prepared to leave, Brittany approached me with a smug smile. "I hope you don't mind, but I've already ordered a new desk for the office." Andrew helped me pick it out. "It's being delivered next Tuesday." I felt as though I'd been slapped. The drive home was tense, with Andrew immediately turning on the radio to avoid conversation. When we arrived, I confronted him. "You've been making plans behind my back. Giving out keys to my house, ordering furniture, discussing renovations. This has to stop, Andrew." "It's our house," he insisted. "And you're being unreasonable. Brittany needs this." "No, legally it's my house. And what Brittany needs is to learn independence, not to have everything handed to her." The following week, I returned home from a client meeting to find boxes in my office. My materials had been moved to the sunroom, just as Andrew had suggested, and Brittany's belongings were being unpacked onto my shelves. Andrew and Tyler were assembling a new desk where mine had stood for 2 years. "What is going on here?" I demanded. Andrew barely looked up. "We talked about this, Megan. Brittany's moving in next weekend. We're just getting things ready." "No, you talked at me about this." "I never agreed," I said, my voice shaking. "This is my office in my house." "God, you sound like a broken record," Andrew snapped. My. Marriage is about sharing. Sharing involves mutual agreement," I countered. "This is not sharing. This is taking." Over the next few days, the situation deteriorated further. Andrew told everyone that I had agreed to the arrangement, making me appear unstable when I corrected the record. His family sent texts expressing their disappointment in my selfishness. Even some mutual friends began to look at me differently after hearing Andrew's version of events. I was being systematically isolated and portrayed as the villain for simply maintaining boundaries around my own property. And worse, I was beginning to question my own reasonableness. Was I being selfish? Should I just give up my office, my privacy, and my home's integrity to keep the peace? Stephanie's voice was the counterweight to these doubts. "This is gaslighting, Meg," she insisted during our daily phone calls. "They're trying to make you feel crazy for having perfectly normal boundaries." With each passing day, I felt more alone in my own home, watching as my space was gradually invaded and my protests ignored. But I had no idea that the worst was yet to come. 3 weeks after Brittany's graduation, I was searching for an important client contract in Andrew's home office when I came across a manila folder in his briefcase. I normally wouldn't have looked inside, but the label caught my eye: Reynolds Property Transfer. My maiden name was Reynolds. With shaking hands, I opened the folder to find legal documents regarding my grandmother's house. There were notes about marital property claims and partial ownership rights of spouses. One document had sections highlighted about how long-term contributions to property maintenance could potentially entitle Andrew to a portion of my inherited home. I felt physically ill. While claiming to simply want to help his sister, my husband had been researching ways to claim ownership of my inheritance. I took photos of the documents with my phone and carefully returned everything exactly as I had found it. That evening, I called Miranda Jackson, Stephanie's cousin who worked as a real estate attorney. I explained my situation and sent her the photos of the documents I'd discovered. "This is concerning, Megan," Miranda said after reviewing them. "But the good news is that inherited property is typically considered separate property, not marital property, especially if you've kept it in your name only." "Is the house solely in your name?" "Yes," I confirmed. My grandmother was very clear about that in her will. "The deed was transferred directly to me." "That's good," Miranda said. "But these notes suggest they're looking for loopholes. Have you commingled finances related to the house? Used joint accounts to pay for renovations or repairs?" I thought carefully. "We have a joint account for household expenses, but major house repairs have always come from my separate account." "I've been careful about that." "Smart woman," Miranda commented. "Look, I don't want to alarm you, but you should check your financial accounts immediately. These kinds of situations can escalate quickly." Following her advice, I began reviewing our financial records that night while Andrew was at a work dinner. What I discovered was devastating. There had been several large withdrawals from our joint savings account over the past month, totaling nearly $15,000. Money that I had contributed from my business earnings. The next day was Brittany's birthday. Andrew had been secretive about her gift, saying only that it was something special. I now had a sickening suspicion about what that gift might be. That evening, the Thompsons came over for a birthday dinner that Patricia had insisted on hosting at our house. After the main course, Andrew stood up with a champagne glass in hand. To celebrate Brittany's graduation and acceptance to business school, he announced, "I have a special gift." He handed Brittany an envelope tied with a ribbon. She opened it eagerly, then squealed with delight. "The entire East Wing?" she exclaimed. "Really? What exactly does that mean?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Andrew looked at me with challenge in his eyes. "It means that Brittany will have exclusive use of the East Wing of the house for as long as she needs it. The office, guest room, connecting bathroom, and small sitting area. We've already started renovations." "With my money," I said. $15,000 from our joint account." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly replaced by defiance. "Our money, Megan. That's how marriage works." "And did you tell Brittany about the legal documents you've been researching? About how to claim ownership of my inheritance?" The room fell silent. Patricia and Gerald exchanged glances. Brittany looked confused. "What is she talking about, Andrew?" Gerald asked. "She's being dramatic," Andrew dismissed. "I was just doing some basic legal research about our property rights." "My property," I corrected. "The house my grandmother left to me, which you've been unreasonably protective of." Andrew's voice rose. "We're family. What's yours should be ours." "So you admit you were looking into ways to claim my house?" I pressed. "I was looking into ways to make things fair," he shouted, his face reddening. "You hold this house over my head like you're doing me some favor by letting me live here." "I never said that," I replied calmly. "But it is legally my house, and I get to decide who lives here." "So selfish," Patricia muttered. "After everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "We welcomed you into our family," Gerald said pompously. "Gave you connections for your little business." "Connections I never used," I pointed out. "My business succeeded on its own merits." "The point is," Andrew cut in, "Brittany is moving in next weekend." The decision is made. I took a deep breath and looked directly at my husband. No, she's not. I will not have my home taken over or renovated without my consent. I will not have my office displaced. And I will not be bullied by any of you. Andrew's face contorted with rage. He stood up so quickly that his chair toppled backward. You ungrateful bitch. After everything I've done for you, what have you done except try to take what's mine and give it to your sister? I asked quietly. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Andrew strode around the table toward me, his right hand raised. Before I could react, he slapped me hard across the face. The force knocked me sideways, and I tasted blood where my lip had split against my teeth. Shocked silence filled the room. Even Brittany looked horrified. I want you out of this house now, you bastard. Andrew shouted, his body shaking with rage. I straightened up slowly, touching my fingers to my bleeding lip. Looking into the eyes of the man I had married, I saw a stranger. In that moment, I knew with absolute clarity that our marriage was over. Okay, I said simply. Andrew seemed taken aback by my calm response. He had expected tears, pleading, or capitulation. Instead, I stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and walked upstairs to the guest room without another word. Behind me, I could hear Patricia's hushed voice. She'll come around. She has nowhere else to go. How wrong they were. I had options they couldn't imagine, and a strength they had severely underestimated. I spent that night in the guest room, locking the door and pushing a chair against it for good measure. I heard Andrew stumbling around downstairs, the clink of a bottle against glass suggesting he was drowning his anger in more alcohol. The Thompsons had left shortly after the incident, Patricia murmuring something about giving us space to work things out. Early the next morning, before Andrew awoke, I slipped out of the house with a small bag containing essential documents, my laptop, and a few personal items. I drove straight to Miranda Jackson's law office, having scheduled an emergency appointment by a text the night before. Miranda's expression was grim when she saw my bruised face. This changes everything, she said, photographing my injuries for documentation. We're not just talking about property rights anymore. We're talking about your safety. For the next 3 hours, Miranda walked me through a comprehensive legal strategy. First, we filed for an emergency restraining order based on the domestic violence incident. Next, we began preparing divorce papers citing cruelty and documenting Andrew's financial misconduct. Finally, we drafted a formal eviction notice for Andrew. Since the house is solely in your name, and you have clear documentation of inheritance, we're on solid legal ground, Miranda explained. The restraining order will force him to leave immediately, and the eviction notice covers our bases for the longer term. He has no legal right to give anyone else permission to live there. What about the money he took? I asked. We'll include that in the divorce filing as dissipation of marital assets, she assured me. The court takes a very dim view of spouses who empty joint accounts, especially when violence is involved. With the immediate legal steps in motion, I headed to my mother's house in the next town over. Diane Reynolds had remarried 5 years after my father's death and now lived with my stepfather Robert in a comfortable ranch-style home. When she opened the door and saw my face, she pulled me into a fierce hug. Who did this to you? She demanded, her voice tight with anger. Andrew, I admitted, the word catching in my throat. It was the first time I had cried since the incident. My mother led me to the kitchen table and put on the kettle for tea, a ritual of comfort from my childhood. As I explained everything that had happened, her expression grew increasingly troubled. I never fully trusted that family, she confessed. They always seemed to want to own you, not welcome you. Your grandmother would be furious. The mention of my grandmother brought fresh tears. I feel like I've failed her, Mom. She wanted me to protect the house, to maintain my independence. And you will, my mother said firmly. Eleanor raised you to be strong, just like she raised me. This is a setback, not a defeat. That house has weathered worse storms than Andrew Thompson. She was right. My grandmother had held on to the house through her husband's death, through financial hardships, through decades of social pressure to downsize or move somewhere more modern. If she could stand firm through all that, I could certainly face down the Thompsons. For the next week, I stayed with my mother while maintaining the appearance of thinking things over. Andrew called repeatedly, his messages cycling between rage, self-pity, and manipulation. "You're overreacting to one mistake," he claimed in one voicemail. "If you'd just been reasonable about Brittany, none of this would have happened," he argued in another. "Everyone thinks you're being hysterical," he said, attempting to isolate me further. I didn't respond to any of his messages on Miranda's advice. Instead, I worked remotely, kept in daily contact with Stephanie, and prepared mentally for the confrontation I knew was coming. Meanwhile, I learned from Stephanie, who heard from our mutual friend Kelly Wilson, who lived across the street, that Andrew was telling everyone I was having a mental health episode and that I would come to my senses soon. He had apparently convinced his family that I was being unreasonable and that the slap was a regrettable but understandable reaction to my provocation. More disturbingly, Brittany had started moving boxes into my office, clearly believing that I would eventually capitulate. Kelly reported seeing furniture deliveries and Patricia supervising contractors who came to measure the East Wing windows for new treatments. Their confidence that I would surrender my home and dignity was almost comical in its arrogance. They had so fundamentally misunderstood who I was and where I came from. During this time, Miranda and I gathered extensive documentation. We secured statements from Kelly about the contractors and furniture deliveries. We documented all of Andrew's harassing messages. We obtained records of the withdrawals from our joint account and traced them to payments for furniture and renovation materials. Most damning of all, I discovered through Andrew's cloud backup, which he had carelessly left logged in on my laptop, emails between him and his father discussing strategies for securing Megan's house. One particularly incriminating message from Gerald read, "Once Brittany is established in the East Wing, we can work on having Andrew's name added to the deed. Possession is 9/10 of the law." The more evidence we gathered, the clearer it became that this had been a long-term plan. The Thompsons had been eyeing my inheritance from the beginning, seeing it as a family asset to be claimed rather than my personal property to be respected. "I can't believe I didn't see this coming," I confessed to Stephanie during one of our daily calls. "Manipulators are skilled at making you doubt yourself," she reminded me. "And you wanted to believe in your marriage. That's not a character flaw, Meg. It's a sign of your capacity for love and trust." As the week progressed, Miranda advised me to stay away from the house until the restraining order was served and Andrew was removed. "Let him think he's won," she suggested. "The element of surprise is on our side." My mother helped me gather strength from memories of my grandmother. We looked through old photos and letters, reminding me of the legacy of strong women I came from. In one particularly poignant letter written when I was in college, my grandmother had advised, "Never make yourself smaller to make a man feel bigger. The right partner will celebrate your strength, not diminish it." Andrew had failed that fundamental test. He didn't want a partner. He wanted possession, both of me and of my property. By the end of the week, all our legal documents were in order. The restraining order had been granted based on the documented violence and threatening messages. The divorce papers were ready, citing cruelty, financial misconduct, and irreconcilable differences. The eviction notice for both Andrew and any guests he had invited, specifically naming Brittany, was prepared. Now we just needed to execute the plan at the perfect moment, when Brittany attempted to officially move in. According to Kelly, the moving truck was scheduled for Saturday morning. Andrew had been boasting to neighbors about his sister's beautiful new suite in my home. The stage was set for their rude awakening. They thought they would be getting keys to my house. Instead, they would be receiving documents that would change everything. I spent Friday night at my mother's house, barely sleeping as I mentally prepared for the confrontation ahead. I reminded myself of my grandmother's words, "This house is your foundation. Never allow anyone to take away your security or sense of home." I had no intention of letting that happen. The Thompsons had severely underestimated the strength of my resolve and the solidity of my legal position. Tomorrow would make that abundantly clear. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, an ironic contrast to the storm that was about to break. I positioned myself in Kelly Wilson's living room across the street, watching through the bay window as a moving truck pulled up in front of my house at precisely 9 o'clock. Brittany arrived moments later in her red convertible, followed by Andrew in his BMW. Patricia and Gerald completed the family procession in their Mercedes SUV. They made quite the picture of affluent entitlement as they gathered on my porch, laughing and talking animatedly. Brittany was gesturing toward the moving truck, apparently giving instructions to the workers who had started unloading furniture. Andrew took out his key and inserted it into the front door lock. His confident smile faltered as the key failed to turn. He tried again, jiggling the handle with increasing frustration. "What's wrong?" I could see Patricia asking. Andrew shook his head, clearly confused. He tried his key again without success. That's when Kelly made her entrance, right on cue. She crossed the street carrying a large manila envelope, her expression pleasantly neutral as she approached the group. "Good morning," she called out. "Are you looking for Megan?" "The locks have been changed," Andrew said accusingly. "Do you know anything about this?" "I haven't seen Megan in a few days," Kelly replied truthfully. "But she asked me to give you this if I saw you." She held out the envelope. Andrew snatched it from her hand, tearing it open impatiently. His face strained of color as he scanned the contents. Patricia peered over his shoulder, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock. Inside the envelope was a cover letter I had written, along with copies of the restraining order, divorce papers, eviction notice, and a detailed accounting of the money Andrew had taken from our joint account. There was also a cease and desist letter from Miranda regarding the unauthorized renovation plans and furniture deliveries. The letter itself was direct and unequivocal. "Andrew, by the time you read this, you will have been legally served with a restraining order requiring you to stay at least 100 yards away from me and from this property. This order was granted based on your physical assault and subsequent threatening behavior. Enclosed you will also find divorce papers citing cruelty and financial misconduct, specifically the unauthorized withdrawal of $15,000 from our joint account for furniture and renovations I never approved. As the house is legally my separate property by inheritance, and your name is not on the deed, I have also included an eviction notice for both you and any guests you may have invited, including Brittany. All personal belongings will be packed by a neutral third party and delivered to an address of your choosing. Any attempts to enter the property will be considered trespassing and a violation of the restraining order, both of which carry legal consequences I'm sure your father can explain to you. Megan Reynolds." From my vantage point across the street, I watched as Andrew's face contorted with rage. He crumpled the letter in his fist and kicked the door violently, leaving a scuff mark on the century-old wood. "She can't do this," he shouted, loud enough for me to hear through Kelly's window. "This is my house too." Gerald took the legal documents from Patricia, who was standing open-mouthed on the porch. As a businessman, he recognized the seriousness of the situation more quickly than his son did. "Andrew, stop," he commanded, grabbing his son's arm as Andrew prepared to kick the door again. "This is a legal restraining order. If you damage the property, you'll be arrested." Brittany began to cry, a theatrical display complete with stamping feet. "What about all my furniture? My stuff? This isn't fair." The moving truck worker stood awkwardly by the half-unloaded furniture, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding family drama. "What's going on?" Tyler asked, arriving late in his own car. "Why is everyone standing outside?" "That bitch locked us out and filed for divorce," Brittany spat, her earlier horror at Andrew's violence apparently forgotten now that her plans were thwarted. Tyler winced at her language. "Maybe we should go somewhere else to figure this out," he suggested, eyeing the neighbors who had begun to peek out their windows at the commotion. Andrew wasn't ready to leave. In a burst of childish rage, he picked up a decorative garden stone and hurled it through the front window, sending glass shattering across the porch. The crash was followed by an immediate wail of alarm sirens. Another detail Andrew had forgotten: the security system my grandmother had installed years ago, which I had recently updated and activated. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers pulled up to the house. The officers approached cautiously, taking in the scene of broken glass, scattered papers, and the clearly agitated family. "We received an alarm alert for this address," one officer said. Is everyone all right? This man has just violated a restraining order and damaged private property, Kelly called from her yard, where she had relocated to witness the events. The homeowner has documentation. What followed was a humiliating ordeal for the Thompsons. Andrew was handcuffed and placed in the police car while the officers reviewed the restraining order paperwork. Gerald attempted to intervene with mentions of family friends on the force and misunderstandings between husband and wife, but the officers were professional and unmoved by his attempts at influence. The moving truck was sent away, the furniture half unloaded on the sidewalk. Patricia made frantic calls, presumably to find storage for Brittany's new acquisitions. Neighbors watched from windows and porches as the family's public meltdown continued. By early afternoon, the street had quieted. Andrew had been taken to the station for processing on charges of violating the restraining order and destruction of property. The Thompsons had retreated, furniture hastily reloaded and driven away. I remained at Kelly's house until I received confirmation from the police that it was safe to return home. Walking back into my house, I felt both relief and sadness. The broken window had been temporarily boarded up, glass shards still sparkling on the porch and entry floor. The home that had been my sanctuary now bore the physical scars of betrayal, much as my face still carried the fading bruise from Andrew's hand. The following weeks were challenging. Andrew was released on bail, and the Thompsons began a coordinated campaign to salvage their reputation and discredit me. Patricia called mutual friends with tearful accounts of my mental breakdown and irrational behavior. Gerald leveraged business connections to spread rumors about my professional reliability. Brittany posted thinly veiled social media attacks, painting herself as the victim of a jealous sister-in-law. I stayed with my mother for the first week while security upgrades were installed at the house. When I returned home, I found eggs splattered on the porch one morning and my garden plants uprooted another day. There was no way to prove who was responsible, but the timing was telling. Andrew's initial rage transformed into manipulation when he realized that anger wasn't working. He sent flowers with apology notes. He enlisted mutual friends to reach out on his behalf, claiming he was getting help and wanted to make things right. He even stood outside my mother's house one evening, looking forlorn until Robert threatened to call the police. Through it all, I maintained my resolve. Miranda represented me aggressively in the divorce proceedings, presenting evidence of the financial misconduct, the documented violence, and the conspiracy to claim my property. The Thompsons hired an expensive attorney who attempted to argue that Andrew had contributed significantly to the house's maintenance and value, but the clear paper trail of separate finances undermined their case. Most surprisingly, about a month after the confrontation, I received a text from Tyler, Brittany's boyfriend. "Can we meet somewhere public? There's something you should know." Cautious but curious, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown, making sure Stephanie knew where I was and waiting nearby. Tyler looked nervous as he slid into the booth across from me. "I wanted to apologize," he began. I had no idea how bad things really were until I saw Andrew's reaction that day. "And I didn't know about him hitting you until much later." "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "But I sense there's more you wanted to tell me." He nodded, glancing around as if worried about being overheard. They had been planning this for months. Even before Brittany's graduation, Mr. Thompson, Gerald, had been talking to Andrew about getting partial ownership of your house since last Christmas. I overheard them discussing how the property values in your neighborhood were skyrocketing and how much equity was being wasted on just 2 people living there. "That doesn't surprise me," I said, though the confirmation still stung. "There's more," Tyler continued. "They were planning to eventually sell the house and use the proceeds to buy a bigger place for the whole family. They kept talking about consolidating family assets and stuff like that. Brittany told me once that her dad thought your grandmother's house could sell for nearly $1 million with the right renovations." The calculated greed behind their plan was breathtaking. They hadn't just wanted to help Brittany with housing, they had been eyeing my inheritance as a family investment opportunity all along. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked Tyler. He looked down at his coffee. "Brittany and I broke up last week. The whole situation showed me a side of her and her family that scared me, to be honest. The sense of entitlement, The way they talked about you after everything went down, it wasn't right. And I thought you deserved to know the full truth." His confession provided the final piece of the puzzle, confirmation that my instincts had been correct all along. The Thompsons had never seen me as family. They had seen me as access to assets they coveted, a means to an end. As the divorce proceedings continued, I slowly reclaimed my life and my home. I replaced the broken window, repainted the walls, and scrubbed away every trace of the invasion. With each passing day, my grandmother's house became my sanctuary once again, the painful memories gradually overlaid with new ones of strength and independence. 6 months after that fateful day when Andrew slapped me, I sat in my grandmother's garden, watching butterflies flit between the late summer blooms. The garden had always been her pride and joy, a testament to patience and nurturing. Now it served as a metaphor for my own journey of healing. The divorce had been finalized the previous week. Despite the Thompsons' attempts to drag out the proceedings and claim a portion of my inheritance, the evidence of separate property was irrefutable. The restraining order had been extended for a full year based on continuing harassment, and Andrew had eventually been ordered to pay restitution for the window damage and emotional distress. Surprisingly, not everyone in the Thompson family had closed ranks against me. About 3 months after the separation, I received an unexpected email from James, Andrew's older brother who lived out of state. We had never been particularly close during my marriage, as James had always kept his distance from the family drama. "I heard about what happened from Mom, but her version didn't sound right," he wrote. "After talking to some mutual friends and getting a clearer picture, I wanted to reach out and apologize for my brother's behavior and my family's treatment of you. Having distance from them has given me perspective on how dysfunctional some of their attitudes about property and control really are. If there's anything I can do, please let me know." His acknowledgement was healing in a way I hadn't anticipated. It validated my experience and reminded me that the problem wasn't with me, it was with a family system that prioritized possession over respect. My home had truly become my sanctuary again. I had repainted my office in soothing sage green, replaced the damaged front window with stained glass that cast rainbow patterns across the floor on sunny mornings, and filled the rooms with fresh flowers, music, and occasionally the laughter of friends. The house felt cleansed of the negative energy that had permeated it during those final months of my marriage. My interior design business had not only survived, but thrived during this period of personal turmoil. Perhaps channeling my energy into creative work had been therapeutic, or maybe clients sensed my renewed passion for creating beautiful, personal spaces. I had even expanded my services to include consultation for women reclaiming their homes after divorce or loss, helping them transform spaces associated with painful memories into sources of joy and peace. Therapy had been another crucial part of my healing journey. Dr. Cassandra Morris helped me recognize the patterns of emotional abuse that had escalated over the years of my marriage, the isolation, the gaslighting, the erosion of my autonomy. She helped me understand that the physical violence hadn't come from nowhere, it had been the culmination of years of boundary violations and disrespect. "Many people believe abuse is only physical," she explained during one session. "But by the time Andrew slapped you, he had already been abusing your trust and autonomy for years. The physical act was just the most visible manifestation of his entitlement." Through our work together, I began to recognize the red flags I had overlooked: Andrew's dismissal of my career as just decorating, his subtle undermining of my friendships, his family's constant references to the house as if my inheritance was somehow unearned or unfair. I vowed never to ignore such warning signs again. As my inner circle had contracted with the loss of so-called friends who chose sides or believed the Thompsons' narrative, it had also expanded in unexpected ways. Kelly from across the street had become a true friend, our bond forged in the crucible of that dramatic confrontation. Miranda, initially just my attorney, now joined Stephanie and me for monthly dinner gatherings. My mother and I had grown closer than we had been since my childhood, our shared experience of navigating difficult marriages creating a new dimension of understanding between us. I had even reconnected with Mark Davis, an old friend from college who had reached out after hearing about my divorce through mutual acquaintances. We had started with coffee as friends, our conversations flowing easily as we caught up on the years in between. Unlike Andrew, Mark asked thoughtful questions about my design work, remembered details from our conversations, and respected my boundaries without hesitation or complaint. Whether our relationship would develop into something more remained to be seen, but his presence in my life was a refreshing reminder of how healthy interactions should feel. Perhaps the most unexpected development came 4 months after the divorce was filed, when I received a handwritten letter from Brittany. The envelope arrived with no return address, the handwriting immediately recognizable from years of Christmas cards. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she wrote, "but after everything that's happened, I feel I need to apologize for my part in it all. Tyler and I broke up, and it made me look at a lot of things differently. The way he described my family's behavior from an outsider's perspective was eye-opening. I've started therapy to work on my own issues with entitlement and boundaries. I'm not saying this changes anything between us, and I completely understand if you never want to hear from me again. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for trying to take over your space and for not standing up for you when Andrew hurt you. That moment in the dining room keeps playing in my mind, and I'm ashamed that I didn't do anything to help you." The letter wasn't a miraculous transformation or a bid for reconciliation, but it represented something important: accountability. Whether Brittany's insights would lead to lasting change in her life wasn't for me to determine or monitor. Her journey was her own, just as mine was mine. Sitting in the garden that summer evening, I reflected on all the lessons the past 6 months had taught me. I had learned to trust my instincts, to value my independence, and to recognize when compromise crosses into capitulation. I had discovered a well of strength within myself that I hadn't known existed, a resilience inherited from my grandmother and mother before me. The house around me stood as a testament to generations of women who had maintained their autonomy through property ownership, just as my grandmother had written. Its walls had witnessed joy and pain, beginnings and endings. Now it was witnessing my rebirth as a woman fully coming into her power, no longer diminishing herself to accommodate others' expectations or demands. If you're watching this and find yourself in a situation where your boundaries are being violated, your voice silenced, or your property threatened, I hope my story gives you courage. There is life after standing up for yourself, even when it feels like you're standing alone. I've received so many messages from women in similar situations, and I want you to know that your instincts matter. That discomfort you feel when someone dismisses your needs or makes decisions without consulting you, it's valid. The concern that arises when someone treats your possessions as theirs to distribute or modify, it's legitimate. Have you ever had to stand your ground against people who felt entitled to what was yours? Or have you helped a friend through a situation like mine? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more reflections on rebuilding after betrayal. And if you know someone who might draw strength from hearing this journey, share it with them. Thank you for witnessing my story. Remember that, like my grandmother's garden, healing takes time, patience, and consistent nurturing. But the beauty that eventually blooms is absolutely worth the effort. Wishing you the strength to protect your boundaries and the wisdom to recognize those who truly deserve your trust.